It is the first conversation for 2023, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's our 7th one in the series. My name is Ronelle Klein, and I'm your host. Today, I'm the CEO of the Fluid Rock Governance Group. And, you know, we have these sessions for a few reasons. The first reason, and the most important reason, is that we really enjoy sharing conversations with our stakeholders that can be helpful on every level, on a personal, work level, executive, board level. And then I'm forever curious and inquisitive about how business works and ultimately how it affects boards. What should the boards be looking at? What are the new trends? And today we are talking about what is revenue operations and how it creates value with Peter Ivanov and with Guinevere Thompson from the Marketing Center. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ronelle.
We're going to be introducing now, and if I miss anything, I mean, your CVs are so impressive. I'm very, very honored to have you here today. So how did we get here? I mean, originally I spoke to Kim from the Marketing Center, and our discussion was very much about how it's difficult for board members to know how to know if marketing is adding value to the organization or not, what metrics to look at, unless you have a marketing guru on the board. The rest is it's a bit of an unknown industry, and then she insisted that I meet Peter and Guinevere, and we had a fascinating pre-discussion as we were preparing for today. I think it's quite groundbreaking. It brings quite a lot of alignment and an easy way for the board to measure this investment potentially. So while we are having this discussion, please feel free to pop your questions or comments or thoughts in the chat, and we are going to continually monitor it, and so that we can pop back and answer any or tag on to any of those questions or thoughts that you have. So to introduce you to our panelists, first of all, it's Peter. He's a marketing director at the Marketing Center. Peter is a chartered marketer and a registered practitioner at SWACWA, Marketing Association of South Africa, and the European Union Marketing Commission. He has an extremely vast amount of knowledge and experience about marketing and also revenue operations. He's an innovative person, and he really also have a keen understanding on B2B and B2C, which is always my question that I have. Then to go to Guinevere. Guinevere is also a marketing director at the Marketing Center, and she has almost 2 decades of experience in marketing in a multitude of industries, as well as B2B and B2C all across Africa. And she has held senior positions in strategic marketing and management in relation to business modeling through strategic marketing. So these are the people that know, and I'm really, really keen to kind of kick off our conversation. So let's do that. So Peter, please tell us a little bit, if you can just 101 for us, what is revenue operations?
Okay, so revenue operations is really about creating alignment between your key customer-facing processes within a business. And that means the alignment of your sales, your marketing, service operations, and in many respects, your data processes to accelerate a cycle of value creation. That, in essence, is what it's all about. And the key to this whole process lies in the topic revenue and revenue growth. That's what it's about.
I mean, it's definitely a focus of companies is to ensure that there's value on all levels, of course, financials, but, you know, all across the value chain. So how did this come about? How was revenue operations created? Where does it come from? Give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, so a little bit of background about it. Revenue operations probably started about 8-9 years ago, in essence. Like with a lot of business model processes, it had its roots in the United States. Where it really started, and it started around the tech sector. So technology companies started looking at data specifically and what was happening in data. And you may remember a few years back, there was a big buzz about big data. What do we do with data? Data is going to be the new gold, and how do we manage this entire process? And that is true. And what has happened was that a breakdown within the organization silos that were not using or aligning data correctly. And as a consequence, data started to lose its shine and started to lose its ability to really drive and change business. So the clever folks really got together and started thinking about what do we need to do to make this revenue operations process really work. And they came to the conclusion that because you have these silos within business, and the typical silos are your sales silo and your marketing silo and your service operations silos and your data silos, that none of them were talking to each other effectively. And more importantly, none of them were sharing the same objective or same goal. And they were going off in their own right, doing their own things. And executives were wondering why they were not seeing the returns that they needed. So what revenue operations did was they broke down those silos completely, brought these teams together. So you've got now one single dynamic team. And that's where that alignment process comes in. So you've got their marketing, sales, customer operations, all working in the same business with the same goal for the purpose of maximizing revenue out of the customer lifecycle process. And that's fundamentally what the bottom line is all about, is making sure that business are really engaged with their customers and understanding the importance of that customer lifecycle model and actually maximizing revenue and profitability out of that process. So that's really fundamentally where this all kicked off from, and how it's developed to the point of where it is right now.
What I find very interesting is your first point there, that it's the most talked about B2B business models post-pandemic. How did the COVID influence this? I mean,
you see, it was quite interesting with all of us on a global basis being isolated and unable to call on customers as we did traditionally. A lot of processes were speeded up, especially from a technology point of view. I mean, the growth, for example, in online shopping on a global basis has been phenomenal. It's gone through the roof. People that would never have shopped online historically are now shopping online. And we can see even in our own country, the growth from a retail perspective of all the various offerings that have occurred as a consequence of the growth in online shopping. And as a consequence of that, there was a real problem of missing that connection with the customer. But by the same token, there was a huge amount of data being generated as a consequence of people engaging with organizations in an online environment. So with that said, we needed to actually understand how sales could interpret that information and how marketing could use that information to actually better reach and better communicate with that customer group. And you can see there's some stats up on the screen at the moment that indicate that a lot of growth leaders were looking at redefining their commercial architecture to adapt to the economies of selling, because they changed so radically. And they're never going to go back to where they were. There will always be this hybrid process that occurs between your customer engagement and your organization itself. And the key in between those two elements, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is the internet and your presence online and what you're doing online and your engagement activity in an online environment and the technology that you're using to make sure that you're collaborating with all that information across the organization.
So if I try and put it into lawyer speak, or if I want it for a lawyer, if I can say, it's basically they saw that there are obstacles in an organization because of silos, put them all in the same team, and these guys are now working off the same data sets to fulfill their individual roles for the same goal.
You know, you're absolutely correct. Your summary of that is 100% accurate. And I think the most important element that you raised there is the data sets, is that everybody is using the same data set and have the same picture. You're not looking at it purely from a customer service point of view. And sales aren't looking at it from a transactional point of view. You've got this full picture, this full rich picture around your customers and what's going on with your customer set. Because at the end of the day, if we draw everything down to the very basic common denominator, without that customer and that revenue being generated, we actually don't have a business. You know, that's the fundamental process. So boards don't exist if there aren't customers and revenue being generated as a consequence of that process. So it's really the absolute basic fundamental of business at the end of the day, and that's critical. You can see with this particular slide we've got on screen at the moment, where they're saying that 70% of the customer's journey, and this is one of the key things, is completed before a customer even engages with a sales team. And that's because of everything that's published online. And when sales teams do engage after that process, the sale invariably is lost, especially in a B2B environment. A lot of organizations are doing more and more online research, understanding what organizations have to offer, what reviews are being published about those organizations. And really, they know a lot more about the product and your service offering than the average customer would have 5 or even 10 years ago. And that is what's shaping their decision-making process. And one of the key critical elements out of the revenue operations process is really understanding your customer journey map. And a lot of organizations don't understand it. They don't understand how customers engage with them. They don't understand how and where customers make that purchase decision. And where customers have a problem between the CX, or the customer experience process, and the UX, the user experience elements of the business. And invariably, the two are often, even at a very senior level, are confused. And they're confused from the point of view of senior executives believing it's one and the same thing when they're completely and utterly different things. And to illustrate my point, and we use an online environment, if you were going to go and book an airline ticket right now, you would probably, in most cases, go online, go to the airline company that you wish to fly with, and you would make your booking. And there would be a process, a customer experience process you would go through. How they navigated you through the site, how easy it was to book your ticket, how easy it was to book your seat, etc., etc., etc. And that would be the experience that you would have in terms of the customer experience. When it came to the user experience, however, is you now arrive at the airport to go in through the check-in process, and everything falls apart. The people are late, they don't do it properly, there's a problem with your bag. When you get to the other end, your bag is missing, and all these other issues, and that's the user experience defined. And it's all part and parcel of the customer journey. And because we don't understand this, and because we're not working as teams collectively to understand that process, this is where we miss the opportunities and miss the insights to actually better drive a coherent process of our service delivery as an organization. And as a consequence of that, maximize that customer lifetime value and maximize the revenue and profitability that we achieve.
Can I just say something, Peter?
Yeah.
So, often there's a confusion between, as you rightfully say, there's a confusion between UX and CX experience. So it's not understood exactly what the customer experience is, and often it is confused with customer service, which is completely incorrect.
Yeah.
I always say that customer experience is the best way to look at that is really to define that every customer touch point forms part of the customer experience. And that's also how you can break it down, is to examine and break down, evaluate customer touch points, which is coherent of the customer journey, really see how the customers interact with your brand.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. And what I'm picking up from what you started off by saying, and Guinevere, maybe you can also expand on this for us, is it's as if the customer journey is starting way earlier than normal businesses would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And because people have more information available, and that information comes in all sorts of shapes and forms, from referrals, from engagements on Facebook, to professional assessments and commentary on LinkedIn, to your website, to thought leadership articles that are published, etc., etc., customers are able to build up a massive picture about organizations long before these things even come to light, and before there's actual engagement. And interestingly enough, a lot of these same processes occur when people are looking at organizations from an investment point of view. Which shares should I be buying? Why are their shares performing the way they are? What is their attitude to environmental issues? What is their attitude to procurement processes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of these things are now influencing the way people actually engage. And shareholder groups now can become very vocal in an online environment as well. So there's a massive amount of influence that can occur outside of the control of the business in the normal environment that we used to operate in. So once again, for me, it comes back down to one thing: is how do we build business sustainability going forward? And if we're not understanding what's going on from a customer point of view and understanding these various processes, and I'm glad these 6 critical pillars have been brought up here, because this is all that we're talking about in terms of, for example, data, the health and the infrastructure of our data, the administration and stewardship of that data. Yes, we've got regulations such as GDPR and POPI and so forth that we have to comply with, but also we need to make sure that the data that we do have is captured and used in a similar fashion. You'd be amazed at how many large organizations have different data sets on the same customer, and the information within those data sets is either incomplete or captured incorrectly. You know, if you think about it, you're trying to drive engagement with your customers to generate additional revenue and grow your business and grow stakeholder value. If you're not managing this process, you're not going to be able to deliver at the end of the day. And it starts with the data.
Yes, and I mean the data, and if we draw the line back to corporate governance, I mean, King 4 specifically says that data needs to be governed in a specific way. So I'm very interested in what you talk about is stewardship of data. And I mean, and what happens if your data is captured wrong at a ground level, it filters up and you're going to make the wrong decisions because the data is ineffective. So tell us a little bit more about data. I'm very, very interested in this. I mean, I've heard a lot of times.
One of the biggest issues that we see in organizations is the multitude of systems, whether they are marketing systems, so MarTech or sales tech, or ERP systems that are used in organizations that are not aligned and are not talking to each other. And this is where you see the single biggest problem, and you're not getting a single source of truth out of these different systems that you're operating. So, for example, your finance department and your finance people are capturing customer information in one particular way. Your marketing and sales team are doing it completely differently. And straight away, you've got a misalignment and a mismatch between the two processes. Likewise, you've got often organizations that are running CRM systems, for example, and the data that finance has and they're sitting on is not included in the CRM process. So when you're looking at a single source of truth around a client, you're not seeing a full picture. So you're not seeing, for example, hey, maybe this particular client or that particular client group or have a problem with the payment of their accounts, for example. A simple little thing like that. And these issues can become quite problematic when you start to engage with customers. You know, so for example, finance decides, and it's a simple thing, I know, but finance decides that a customer is not behaving properly, so they put the account on hold. Sales and marketing know nothing about that, and as a consequence, go and reach out to the client, and all of a sudden have the client infuriated because their account's put on hold and we're trying to sell them stuff. It's fundamental little issues like that become incredibly problematic. The misuse of information. So some systems capture the surname and then the first name of the organization or the phone number in a different way or in a different format, and the CRM does it in a different way as well. So once again, you're unable to bring this information together in terms of the administration of that information and use that information in a very positive and very dynamic way. point of view. I don't know whether you know more about this than I do. I don't know whether you've got things to add to that.
I think that's absolutely correct. The biggest, a company's biggest asset is their customer database. And many companies do have databases that are not in sync. There's not same customer details, but it's captured in many different ways. So when you start implementing the marketing stack tools and CRM, it's incompatible. So it means that there's a lot of rework in order to get that data and data mining, etc., to get through to that correct data that you can actually use it in the intended purpose. Also, I just want to say, in terms of the pillars, data, customer processes, all the pillars that's listed on the left-hand side, most companies do have that in place. It's just a matter of understanding the processes that is involved in one of them and identifying the gaps. Because once we break that down into once we take these processes or one of these pillars and we break down those processes and identify the gaps, that could also make it easier in terms of realigning the RevOps in a more coherent fashion.
Sure.
So is there something like a data health check or status or measurement or metric that we can table to boards to say, well, I just thought about it now, so it's not like I know, but like your data is 89% healthy because you mentioned health.
Yeah. So we can take data sets and run data sets through a variety of systems to check validity of that data and accuracy of that data. And it's within the POPI compliance process to do that, and GDPR for that matter. But very few companies actually take their data and actually do these checks. For whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure why we don't do it on a regular basis, but we should be doing it on a regular basis. So if you looked at, for example, at board level and you had a risk and audit committee, for example, one of the things that they should be looking at is how healthy is our data? And do we understand what data we've got and what data we should be having, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a myriad of questions that could be asked around the health of your data within an organization itself.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm harping on data before we move on now, but I mean, for me, it is, we have a board reporting course that we have, and there we delve into, if you have data, if you work with it, becomes information. If you work with it, more knowledge. If you work with it, insight, and then wisdom. So, but the foundational level is the data. And I think that maybe there's trust in the system that the data is correct. So unless you hear otherwise, and you have so many other fires to look at, right?
Sure, but this is where revenue operations really comes into play, because it's amalgamating all these different previously siloed departments into one, where collectively we're looking at it. And it's the reason why on that pillar you can see data is the number one thing. The reason for that is when you start looking at customer processes, journey mapping, sales engagement, segmentation profiling, quarterly business reviews, it all revolves around accurate your KPI and reporting process. So your business development, your pipeline, in other words, your sales pipeline, forecasting, predictable forecasting, customer lifetime value, customer retention values, all rely on data. And if you haven't got the right data, you're not going to be able to report correctly. So as a consequence, your reporting upwards at board level is inaccurate as well. And you don't have that single source of truth. And we see this. Typically what used to happen in the sales environment, and this is a term that you may or may not have heard of before, is salespeople used to sandbag, or salespeople sandbag. Okay, so what sandbagging is they're working on deals and they've got a whole bunch of deals that they actually don't put in the system. So when you're looking at the system, you're looking at your revenue pipeline and your funnel forecasting, for example, you see X, Y, Z. What the sales guys are sitting with is ABC, which you're not seeing. And they will actually introduce ABC on a quarterly basis as and when they need it. But from a board point of view, you're sitting there saying, well, we're sort of marginally performing okay, but you're not seeing the real picture. So as a consequence, it affects decisions that you're making. It affects things like simple things like cash flow forecasting. What is our cash flow forecasting actually looking like going forward? Well, if you haven't got the right data, how are you going to have accurate cash flow forecasting? You're not. And this is why we talk about the single source of truth, because by having eliminating these silos, we can actually get and start to manage accurate, insightful information that allows us to drive companies forward quite aggressively. And that's the whole point about it. So once again, we talk about the tech stack. So the evaluation of the stack that we're currently using, its administration, and most importantly, the utilization of that. How is it being utilized? I can tell you even from a board point of view, if you had to say to listed organizations or organizations with proper active boards, and you said to them, well, okay, tell me, what percentage are your systems that you've got operating right now in your businesses functional? I guarantee you that if we had to do an audit on it, you'd probably find that around about 70 to 72% of the systems are being properly utilized and the rest aren't. So you're not even using your systems at the levels that they should be utilizing, because the people internally are not using it, because there's no collaboration to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal, and as a consequence of that, we've got the same and right information. And
yes,
that's
and
why
systems,
data sits at number one.
Yes, no, it's very interesting. And often systems didn't keep up with the times. And, for me also, I mean, in my life, we work everything onto strategy. So it's also, are you collecting the right data that will give you the right answers if you are achieving your strategy and monitoring your strategy? But systems are put in place, data is collected, and you swim in a sea of data often. And what are the key and the salient points?
Exactly. And you need to be asking the questions, and you need to be interrogating the data accurately to understand exactly what is it telling us about our business, what is it telling us about the market segments that we actually operate in, what is it telling us about what we have as an organization, even right down to your product portfolio. You might have quite a large product portfolio, but when you actually mirror what customers are purchasing against the portfolio you carry, you can often see massive misalignment there. And then you've tied up all this money into product that you actually shouldn't be carrying. And once again, it's a data insight that actually gives you that opportunity to interrogate that process.
Yeah. So before we move off data, maybe I can ask Guinevere and then Peter, maybe you can share some real life case studies where you've seen things go wrong with data, you intervened, and then things went right after. Maybe you can, we're doing cup half full today.
So I've got a perfect case study I can elaborate. So I won't name the organization, but the organization itself they were operating as a B2B company, selling tooling, high value, very specialized tooling to the manufacturing sector. When I talk about manufacturing, I'm talking about motor manufacturing, that sort of level of manufacturing. And the question is that we're achieving X percentage revenue at the moment. And the question from the CEO is, how the devil do we grow revenue beyond that particular number? And the first thing I said to the CEO is, what is your data telling you with regards to your top 20% in terms of performance clients that you have in your database at the moment? In other words, it's the 80-20 principle. So invariably, 20% of your customers are going to be generating 80% of your revenue. What does that picture look like? So to cut a long story short, we unpacked that entire process. And as a consequence of doing that, and by engaging with that customer base in terms of a data set that we isolated, and asking that data set if they would be inclined to buy other products from us, and increase our actual transactional value by a mere 15% across the board in terms of the stock that we could supply their companies, their sales, without bringing on one new customer, their sales increased by over 42%, without acquiring one new customer. And that was because we looked at the data, understood what the customers were buying, went to that customer group and said, we know you're buying ABC. If we could sell you X, Y, Z, would you buy that from us as well? And the answer was in the affirmative. And as a consequence, we managed to grow the business without acquiring one new customer.
And that's incredible because you're not reinventing the wheel, you know,
No,
and it's the same
not at all.
customers.
It's looking at your data, understanding what, this is where the journey map comes into play. It's understanding exactly what those customers were buying from you, what you could possibly sell to them, and actually as a consequence of that, upselling them and cross-selling them in those opportunities, generating further revenue and profitability as a consequence of that.
Yes, and building relationships. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
And Peter and Guinevere, do you have a show and tell for us?
Wow, sure. There's so many examples. I'm just trying to think. Okay, so there was a marketing function where the company, it was also a tech company, and they wanted to increase customer engagement. They are making use of different technology stacks, and they have extensive data. We actually managed to have a look at their data and found that, you know, and found where the problem was in terms of where engagement was actually falling short. And again, it's just a matter of interrogating the data. So sometimes we don't know where to look, and that's my point. We have all of this data, and the data is available in various forms on various platforms, various databases, or various locations, and we don't know where to find the answer. You know,
Sure.
Sometimes we try to find the answer by customer behavior, because when you try to solve a problem with data or concerning customer behavior, you would naturally look at the customer behavior. Needless to say, the problem lied directly at their processes, which they did not interrogate, so they did not also further unpack the entire customer journey, what customers would go through, trying to create the account, trying to log in, trying to engage with the brand. And it was almost like it was so evident. It was this problem that was actually just looking right back at you, and it just meant breaking down the processes and understanding the gaps. It's really sometimes back to basics. Really sometimes absolutely. Yes.
And sometimes you just need a specialist to look at it because you've looked at the same thing too long, right? So
Yeah.
Guinevere, maybe you can just take us, what exactly is a customer journey? How do you do it? How do you map it? What is involved?
So it's a physical mapping process where we start literally at point A, and we start to understand how does the customer start finding out about your organization. What do they go through? What do they do? And it differs by product category, it differs by market segment process. You physically have to sit down and actually map it out. We've got a variety of mapping models that we actually use depending on the market segment and or type of product you're selling. But the process always starts with question number one: how do our customers engage with us? How do they find us? How do they reach us? What do they do? And it's by understanding that process that you can then start mapping it out. So after understanding us and really knowing where we are and getting on their radar, what do they do next? Do they go to social media channels to find out more about us? Do they go to our website to find out more about us? Do they engage on our website? Do they read articles about us? Do they follow thought leadership articles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so you begin to map that entire process. And when you're mapping this process, you're also identifying where are things falling out of favor with that customer. So for example, it's a silly example, but I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, your website takes too long to open. So for example, on Google right now, Google says, if your website doesn't open in 2.5 seconds, you're going to lose 40% of your audience. Okay. Now, probably somewhere in the region of about 80% of searches now take place on smart telephones. Okay. So smart cell phones are the fundamental connection point with the website. If your website is not rendering and downloading in under 2.5 seconds in that device, you've lost half your customer base.
And is that for B2B? Oh, sorry, Peter. Is that for B2B and B2C?
Both. It happens in both environments, because professional buyers in a B2B environment also look at reviews and go online to check organizations out as potential suppliers. It's as much, you know what? I often say to people, if they do it in their private capacity as a B2C customer, they're going to do it in their professional capacity as well. And the truth of that is being borne out by video content. So if you look at the growth of video content, somewhere in the region of about 85% of all professional B2B buyers view video content before they make a purchase decision.
Sure, that's high numbers.
And that's even at highly sophisticated antenna or RF technologies even. So you're not just talking about selling a tin of baked beans here, you're talking about serious technology as well. So it happens right across the spectrum, and it's just going to get more and more amplified as time goes by.
So while we're kind of on that topic, how valid, or how do potential customers view referrals, or not referrals? It's almost like reviews.
Yeah, reviews are incredibly important.
Very
and not enough organizations are even aware of their reviews that are occurring online either. And once again, it's a data issue. What sort of social listening are organizations employing or deploying? And how are they using their CRM systems? And a lot of CRM systems these days have built-in social listening processes and platforms. So you can start to understand, and you can start to heat map exactly what people are saying about your organization going forward. Not only that, we can also now look at what are people saying about our competitors in the same environments. And we're not even making use of these resources to understand exactly what's going on in terms of developing our target accounts, or looking at goal setting within the segmentation process that we are trying to achieve. You know?
And that's fascinating. So Guinevere, you're the data lady. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this social listening. I've never heard about it, that Peter just introduced us to. Thanks, Peter. So Guinevere, what is social listening, and how do you think we should be? I'm thinking of again at the board level. Do we listen? Do we receive reports about it? Do we, like, what even would it entail?
I think Peter can also just jump in here, but social listening is really about listening to what customers are saying on various customer or various touch points, as well as most digital platforms.
Yeah.
Customer reviews has really become so powerful that, many companies actually underestimate the power of social listening as well. Peter, what is your experience in that?
So to give you an example of that at a very high level, let's say, for example, you were operating on LinkedIn and you were talking about things on LinkedIn, and you wanted to understand exactly what are the CFOs that are all listed on LinkedIn talking about at the moment. What is the big trend? What is the big topic that everybody is wrestling with and debating, et cetera, et cetera? We can use social listening processes, for example, to actually drill down and to understand exactly what the hot topics are. So as an organization, when it comes to thought leadership articles, you can now start to serve the right thought leadership article that addresses exactly the topic that they're talking about, which will bring a lot more attention to you as an organization. And as a consequence, your customer engagement or your client engagement is going to be a lot more dramatic. And that's exactly it. Not only that, we can see exactly what is being said, what are the negatives coming up. And certainly from a shareholding point of view, if you could go online and understand exactly what shareholders think about your industry, about you as an organization even. And we can drill down and get those absolute positive, negative, and neutral sentiments that are being offered in those environments. And that's incredibly powerful to understand exactly what's going on and how people feel about things. And often sentiment drives the narrative of a particular organization or a particular outcome that you require. And we forget how powerful those processes actually are.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a completely different take. Sorry, Guinevere, it's a completely different take on investor relations. Yeah, no, please go, Guinevere.
So what I want to add is, you know, I was working with another client the other day, and he said, you know, I don't see the value in, you know, something simple as I don't see the value as using hashtags. Again, hashtags filter in with social listening, where communities are built around, you know, hashtags on different digital platforms. And that's also where insight can be gathered in terms of what competitors are saying, what are, you know, key topics in the industry, what is trending, you know, following the social listening on those communities within the digital space.
Sure. So just to add to that, you know, you talk about shareholders and investment sentiment and things like that. I remember not so long ago, there was a very large petrochem company. And in that environment, one of their major investors in that environment started an anti-carbon group. Okay? And the whole idea behind the anti-carbon group was to get other stakeholders and other investors actually rallied around to get the organization to move away from its carbon holdings and put pressure on the organization to drive that decision-making at board level. So that's the power of what can occur. Now, if you don't even know about that from a social listening point of view, how are you going to even remotely address it and be prepared?
You're going to be in the dark.
Yeah,
you're going to be in the dark.
Precisely. So those things we do see.
Yes. So, I mean, on the slide, we've got 10 reasons CEOs are pursuing RevOps. So these are probably the problems we're solving, right? Please take us through this.
We talk about certainly the monetization of commercial data, technology, and relationship assets. These are some of the things that I've been talking about right now, is how do we make sure that we're using our data and technology to build those relationships and build customer lifetime value. That's what that underlying factor is all about. Long-term customer lifetime value and building business sustainability as a consequence of that. Then we talk about managing the selling economy. So this is where we are looking at that absolute collaboration between our sales, marketing, and service operation teams to make sure that we're doing everything possible with one goal in mind, and that is to generate the revenue and profitability as a consequence of that. Differentiating customer experiences. So because we're working together, we're not working in our siloed environments, we're now able to make sure that our customer engagement process and customer experience is far more dynamic and far more fluid as such. We talk about the executing scalable growth technologies. Once again, and we've emphasized this point in our 6 pillars as well. It's about utilizing and looking at the technologies we have and are they fit for purpose. You know, invariably we'll make a decision on an ERP system, and I've seen it in many organizations where they will sit with an ERP system for 10, 15 years and not reevaluate it at all. And these are the key critical elements that we're talking about here. Facilitating business model change and changing from or to a RevOps process is very much a model change and an attitude change that has to occur within the organization itself. Then you talk about improving visibility and transparency. This is all the data insights that we've been speaking about, and giving you absolute clarity and that single source of truth that's occurring within the organization itself. Motivating and enabling your teams, because you've now got this better collaboration, you're going to have a far more motivated organization, as opposed to an organization that is constantly internally fighting each other. You know, and we've often seen that clash between sales and marketing. It's a standard global process that we've seen. We talk about improving technology adoption and the return on investment on that technology. We've not even touched on that as yet, but there's got to be a return on investment. And how are we going to measure that? Eliminating revenue and margin leakage. This is the big thing. This is where we talk about really understanding what's going on with the customer base, understanding what the revenue or the data is telling us about our customers, understanding our retention rates, understanding churn rates. Churn rates are very big, obviously, in the telcos, but understanding what that means from a revenue point of view and profitability point of view. And then obviously supporting your business valuations and your stakeholder performance at the end of the day.
So this is fascinating stuff. I mean, a thought that just crossed my mind was that I think maybe at an exco level, and definitely at the board level, but an exco level, we're not focused on the client enough, but we're more focused on how this operation is going, or that operation, or that operation.
Exactly.
So maybe there's a client centrism that is missing because we don't have the data, and you call it the single source of truth.
Yeah, we call it the single source of truth. Historically, it's been known as a store point. So key critical store points. So you get that point of inflection in a business. And that point of inflection is, are we aware of that point of inflection? Do we understand what that potential store point is? Because if you don't, you're going to be out of business within 5 to 10 years. And if you do, it gives you, or it allows you that opportunity to kick the business on to another level of growth and development. And there's been a multitude of organizations that stumble around these store points and don't understand it. And they don't understand it because they're not looking at these sort of issues. And it all starts with your customer base. What do we really understand about our customers and where are we going? You know, how many companies do you hear that go out of business and they say, oh, we went out of business because we ran out of cash?
No, quite a few.
There's your answer. Okay.
No, definitely. I mean, cash is the lifeblood, right, of any business.
Exactly.
And below
Exactly.
that, and the cash comes from customers.
Cash comes from customers. So here's a very interesting stat about once you've introduced RevOps, what are the type of impacts you see? So these are averages that were taken over the last 12 months. But you can see on average, they increase their sales revenue by as much as 18%. Now, if you consider that a lot of companies are looking for around about 20% growth, there's your answer right there. Then you're looking at increase in profitability around about 17%. Increase in the speed of growth, so your speed to market, your first mover advantages that you're looking for at 19%. Improved stock performance, so this is related to stock exchanges and things like that. They're seeing an improvement of 71%, and then obviously an increase in digital marketing return on investment of as much as 88%. So these are really staggering numbers, and these are not my numbers. This actually comes out of the Boston Consulting Group, but you can see the type of growth that we're actually seeing as a consequence of this sort of process being implemented.
No, I mean, this is fascinating. So, I mean, how would the business even start to approach this revenue operations? Because you said it's a change in business model. The word change is, yeah.
Yeah. So you really have to sit down and bring in the necessary experts that are able to audit your process and understand exactly what's going on in your organization at the moment, to make the necessary recommendations to drive a revenue ops model into your business itself. It's not difficult in terms of the implementation. Probably the hardest work is really understanding what have we got going on at the moment, what does our business look like, what do our customers look like, what systems do we have in place or lack thereof, and what needs to be done to address those particular issues. Because once you've got that in place, the getting the collaboration between your internal departments is actually quite easy once they see the major benefits of the collaboration, actually happen. Okay, so yeah, it's not that difficult, but you need to bring in the right expertise to do it.
And that's you guys, right?
Well, yeah, if I'm punting myself, that's our
You've got to
area
back yourself in life, yeah.
But look, I mean, generally, there's a lot of organizations that are now focusing on RevOps, so we're not the only answer. But yeah, you need to bring in the expertise to actually do it at the end of the day, and
So
that's where it really starts.
So it's very interesting because it seems like marketing has changed into operations or have merged.
Absolutely. So let me illustrate a point. So what marketing has become is a lot more responsible for the revenue performance of the business. It always has been, but this is just a step change and a step up, if you will, in terms of marketing taking a very firm control over revenue generation and understanding what needs to happen from a revenue generation point of view. And in fact, it's quite interesting. If you go to companies like Coca-Cola, for example, about 2 or 3 years ago, they replaced their chief marketing officer. I think the guy retired at the time, but the new incumbent that came in, they changed his title to chief revenue officer straight away. He has a marketing portfolio, and his remit is around brand development and marketing, share growth, et cetera, under the process of revenue development. Because everything that we do from a marketing point of view, by building awareness around brands, by building awareness around product, et cetera, at the end of the day, is purely about selling that product and revenue generation that comes as a consequence. That's what it's all about.
Yes, that is ultimately the way that, sorry, Renelle.
No, give it, please go.
That is ultimately the way that marketing has evolved into. It's become more, obviously, number one, data-driven, number two, more revenue-driven, number three, more process-driven as well. Sorry, I was just reading another comment in terms of ROI marketing spend is quite massive. I've worked with another company where digital was the number one, the biggest revenue stream of the organization was driven through digital. So digital and marketing per se has really evolved into a revenue generating stream for an organization when it is deployed correctly.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, Wendy. I mean, we talk about, in this conclusion here, we talk about end-to-end visibility. So we now start to look at predictability or predictive modeling or predictive selling. So, for example, various organizations now globally, because of the data they've collected on their customer, are able now to do a push sell. So instead of waiting for the customer to make an order, we now push an order out to you because we understand what you purchase on a regular basis. So now all of a sudden you start to do predictability ordering, which has a massive impact on your if you're a manufacturer, for example, on understanding what happens from a manufacturing perspective. So all of these things are changing quite rapidly, how we're starting to understand the business as a consequence of understanding data. And this is where it becomes really, really key critical. And of course, then you get funnel accountability and better cross-functional collaboration as a consequence of managing this whole process. From an operations point of view, we talk about buyer journey alignment, KPI measurements, and then of course reduce friction as a consequence of it. And then technology, there again we refer to consolidated systems, reduced redundancy, and enhanced visibility around the business. Those are the three key elements that come out of the whole RevOps model, specifically if you're looking at business sustainability.
And that's fascinating. So if we can draw it to the board,
Sure.
We only have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
So from a board perspective, I mean, a lot of this makes sense and it will result in measurements that they're watching already. But it seems as if there's some lead indicators that they should be watching that they're not maybe.
Sure. You're 100% right. That assessment is absolutely accurate. And I don't think it's any fault of the board as such. I think it's just because these things have evolved and they're evolving at such a rapid pace, that you really need to be on top of what's going on from a trend perspective.
No, I mean, as an executive, it's very difficult to know what you need to report to a board. You know, you try your best.
Sure.
Most people try their best. So what are the measurements that you think, first of all, an exco should look at? And then what should be reported to a board? Because, I mean, if an exco sees their data is dirty, they're probably going to clean it, right? So, I mean, what are the things do you think that they should be looking at that they're not looking at right now?
Well, it could be things like, for example, what is our client retention rate? What does that look like? What does our retained clients contribute in terms of revenue contribution and profitability contribution? Understanding what that existing customer, because often the focus is on acquiring new customers. Where do we get new customers? Where do we get new business from, et cetera, without looking at exactly what we're sitting with right now. And don't forget, it is far cheaper to service an existing customer than acquire a new one. So the measurement has got to be, what does our customer base look like? What does that customer lifetime value look like? What are our retention rates? And how are we managing this going forward? It also then talks on the converse of that to our churn rates as well. And what are customers that are churning out of our business actually costing us?
Okay, Guinevere, anything from your side?
I think really to stay on top of on your business erosion is quite essential. It's quite important. I think not a lot of focus is placed on that in terms of, you know, where are we losing, where we can maintain and where we can grow. I think sometimes it is addressed, you know, at strategy sessions or yearly sessions when it's time to plan, but it's really something that business erosion is really something that should be kept at a constant top of mind.
Sure.
I think that's fundamental.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think just one last comment from my side. It's also about the predictability of the business as well. So invariably, when we're looking at financials at the board level, there's all sorts of current projections of where we are, what's happening, et cetera. This process gives us a lot more confidence in the predictability outcomes of those numbers. And there's a myriad of metrics that you can institute as well. I mean, it would take us another hour to talk about those.
Oh, I'd love to hear. I mean, I think every CEO in this VUCA world of ours would love to have a predictable business, you know, just for a couple of weeks out of the year at least.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. I mean, I see, you know, linking again your world with our world, which is there's an ISO standard, ISO 37000, that was published in a year and a half ago or so, and they really talk about your stakeholders. Customers is one of them, and the relationships, and it goes really deep into the organization. So there's a lot of links with that. And when you talk about Genevieve, when you said business erosion, we talk about value erosion, and then we want to have value preservation or creation. You know, so there's a lot of links there, and I can see that there is almost like the worlds at the moment are coming closer to merge or collide or build or create synergies in this. So I think we need to wrap up. From my side, Peter and Guinevere, it's fascinating stuff. I can see that we can have a whole day conversation about this, and that there's a massive amount of value that you can bring to companies when it comes to understanding their client, what the client really needs, internal structuring, so that everything flows better, and then there's one single source of truth that everybody acts on. So to all our attendees, I really want to express our word of thanks. Please book our next In Conversation With. It's being held on the 2nd of March, and we are going to look at the trends in cyber risks, because that's what we have seen from the past few board packs is definitely on everybody's lips and minds. And that's going to be an interesting one as well. Please look at the Academy's courses. There are amazing courses coming up. And of course, the ISO course, we have an online course that's internationally accredited with APMG. So with that, everyone, thanks so much for another great session. All the best.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.